Chapter 26. I must own that, till up now, things had not gone so badly with us, and I should have been graceless to complain. If the average of difficulties did not increase, we must accomplish our purpose in the end, and in what glory we should win. I began positively to reason like Lindenbrock himself. Seriously, I did. I wonder if it was owing to my strange surroundings at present. Maybe it was. For some days, we came to a succession of steep inclines, some of them almost frighteningly perpendicular, which was brought us to a long way toward the interior. On some days, we advanced 1.5 leagues to 2 leagues, but these were perilous descents, in which we were greatly helped by the adroitness of Hans and his marvelous sang-froid. Thanks to him, we got over many a bad place that we could never have scrambled through by ourselves. His absolute silence, however, increased every day. Even I think it grew upon us also. External objects have an actual influence on the brain. Anyone shut up within 4 walls loses the faculty at last of associating words and ideas. Look at prisoners in solitary cells. How they become imbeciles, if not insane, by the disuse of their thinking faculties. During the fortnight which had followed our last conversation, nothing occurred within the mentioning. I could only recall to mind one event of any importance, and that I could never forget. I have a reason to remember every particular of it, even the smallest detail. On the 7th of August, our successive descents had brought us to the depth of 30 leagues. That is to say, we had our heads 30 leagues of rocks, ocean, continents, and cities. We have been then 200 leagues from Iceland. Today, the tunnel was but very slightly slanting. I was ahead of the others. My uncle was carrying one of the Ruhmkorff's apparatus, and I had the other examining the beds of granite. All at once, on the turning round, I found myself alone. All right, I thought, I have been going too fast, or Hans and my uncle may have stopped for a minute on the road. Come, I must go back to get them. Fortunately, the path is not steep. I retraced my steps, and after walking for a quarter of an hour, looked around me. Nobody was in sight. I called out. No answer. My voice drowned in the midst of the hollow echoes awakened by the sound. I began to be uneasy, and a shudder crept over me. Be calm, I said to myself aloud. I am sure of finding them again. There are not 2 roads. I was walking in front, so I must just keep going back. I went back for a half hour longer, and I listened to hear if anyone had called me, for in so dense of an atmosphere I could hear a long way off. There was not a sound. A strange silence reigned throughout the gallery. I stopped. I could not believe in my isolation. I had lost my way. I was not lost. I should get right again presently. There is only the one passage, I kept saying to myself, and as they are in it, I must come up to them soon. I have only to keep ascending. Unless, not seeing me, and forgetting I was in front, they had gone back to look for me. But then even by hurrying, I should overtake them. That's evident. I repeated these last words like a man who was not very certain, and moreover, it took me a long time to put my ideas together in all the shape of a conclusive argument, simple enough as they were. Then a doubt crossed my mind. Was I really ahead of my companions when I had got parted from them? Certainly I was. Hans was following me, and my uncle came after him, and he had even stopped for minutes to fasten the packages on his shoulder. I remembered this circumstance distinctly. It was at this very moment I must have gone too far. Besides, I thought, it is impossible I could have gone too far wrong, for I have a guide to lead me through this labyrinth, one that will never fail me, my faithful stream. I have only to follow it back, and I cannot help finding my companions. This conclusion reanimated me, and I resolved to set out immediately, without losing an instant. How blessed the foresight of my uncle now, in not allowing the hunter to stop up the hole in the granite. This beneficent spring, after the refreshed us on the road, was now to be guided through the winding mazes of the earth's crust. Before starting, I thought I should be better of the sundry ablutions. I dipped my face into the Hansbach, but judge of my stupefaction. I touched dry, rough granite. The stream no longer ran at my feet. Chapter 27. I could not describe my despair. No human tongue could have tell what I felt. I was buried alive, with the prospect before me of dying of cold and hunger. I passed my burning hands mechanically over the ground. How dry the rock seemed! But no, I could have forsaken the course of this stream, for there it was certainly not. Now understood the cause of this strange silence when I listened for the last time, expecting to hear a call from my companions. I had not, till this moment, noticed the absence of the stream. It was evident that just as I took the first wrong step, the gallery must have forked, and I had followed the new opening, while the Hansbach, obeying the caprice of another incline, had gone away into my companions toward unknown depths. How could I get back? There was not a track. My feet left no imprint on the granite. I racked my brain to discover the solution of this problem. One single word expressed all the misery of my situation. Lost! Yes, lost at what seemed to me an immeasurable depth. These 30 leagues of an earth's crust were weighing down my shoulders terribly. I felt crushed. I tried to bring my thoughts back to the upper world, but I scarcely succeeded. Hamburg, the house in Königstrasse, my poor Grauben, all the living world, beneath which I was lost, passed rapidly before my terrified memory. I saw, as if in some hallucination, all the incidents of the journey, the voyage, Iceland, Mr. Fridriksson, Snaefell. I said to myself the faintest shadow of hope in my position would be madness, and that I had far better to spare. What human power, indeed, could bring me back again to the surface of the globe, or tear down these enormous arches supporting each other above my head? Who could set me in the right track once more, and take me to rejoin my companions? "Oh, uncle!" I cried in the accents of despair. This was the only word of reproach that came to my lips, for I knew how much the poor man would suffer while he was vainly searching for me. When I saw myself thus wholly cut off from human succor, incapable of attempting anything for my deliverance, I thought of heavenly succor. Memories of my childhood, of my mother, whom I had only known in the sweet days of my infancy, came back to me. I began to pray, little as deserved that God should know me when I had forgotten him so long, and I prayed fervently. This cry would help to heaven made me calm, and I was able to bring my mind to the survey of my actual position. I had provisions long enough for 3 days, and my gourd was full. However, I could not stay where I was any longer. But what course should I take? Should I ascend or descend? Ascend, evidently, always keep ascending. I must then inevitably come to a part where there was a gallery that had forked, but I regained the stream, but could at any rate get back to the crater of Snaefell. How hadn't I thought of this sooner? There was clearly some chance of deliverance here. My very first business was to find the Hansbach again. I rose up, and leaning on my iron-tipped staff, began to climb the gallery. The incline was pretty steep, but I walked on hopefully and unconcerned, like a man who has not the choice of roads before him. The first half an hour I met with no obstacles. I tried to recognize the way by the form of the tunnel and by the projections of certain rocks, how the disposition of fractures, but no particular appearance occurred to me, and I soon saw that this gallery would not bring me to the point of declaration. It was a blind alley. I struck against an impenetrable wall and fell on the rock. What terror and despair took hold of me that I have no power to depict. I was completely prostrated. My last hope was shattered against the granite wall. Lost in a labyrinth amid the perfect maze of windings, it was useless to attempt an impossible fight. The most terrible of all deaths stared me in the face, and strangely enough, the thought crossed me that if someday my fossilized body should see the light, what grave scientific questions would be raised by its discovery 30 leagues below the Earth's surface. I tried to speak out aloud, but a hoarse accent alone issued from my parched lips. I was gasping for breath. In the midst of my anguish, a new terror seized me. My lamp had gone wrong when I fell, and I could not rectify it, and its light was paling, and it would soon go out. I saw the luminous current always diminishing in the coil of the apparatus. The procession of moving shadows appeared in the gloomy walls. I did not dare close my eyes, dreading to lose the least atom of its fainting light. Every instant it threatened to go out and wrap me in the blackness of night. At last there was only a faint glimmer of the lamp. I had watched it with a trembling eagerness, concentrating all of my gaze on it as on the last ray of light that my eyes would ever see before the total darkness shall fall on me. What a terrible cry escaped me! On the earth, even in the darkness of night, the light never wholly abandons his rule. It is diffused and subtle, but little as it may remain, the retain of my eye is sensible of it. Here there is nothing. Absolute darkness made me blind in the literal acceptation of the word. Then I had lost my senses. I got up with outspread arms, endeavoring to feel my way, but the attempt was most painful. I ran along wildly through the inextricable labyrinths, always going down deeper into the heart of the earth, like a denizen of subterranean regions, calling, shouting, howling, striking myself against projecting rocks, falling down and getting up again, feeling the blood trickling from me and trying to drink it as it stopped from my face, and always expecting to come to some wall and dash my head against. Whither did the said course lead me, that I am ignorant of this day? After several hours, no doubt, when my powers were exhausted, I fell against the wall like a lifeless man, and lost all consciousness of existence. Chapter 28. When I had revived, my face was wet with tears. How long this state of insensibility had lasted, I cannot say. I had no longer any means of reckoning time. Never was solitude like mine, never was abandonment so absolute. After my fall, I had lost a quantity of blood. I felt danger deluged with it. Oh, how sorry I was that the death had still to come, that it was not over already. I refused to think. I banished every suggestion, and, overcome by grief, I rolled myself toward the opposite wall. I could feel myself already to swoon again, and I thought with satisfaction that with it would all come the final unconsciousness. When a violent noise struck my ear, it was like a long rolling peal of thunder, and I heard the waves of sound lose themselves and die away in the distant depths of the abyss. Whence came the noise? Doubtless from some physical source of the bosom of the terrestrial mass, the explosion of some gas, or the fall of the vast beds of the earth's crust. I listened again. I wanted to know if that noise would be repeated. Every quarter of an hour passed. Silence reigned in the gallery. Nothing was audible but the beating of my heart. Suddenly, my ear, which happened to touch the wall, was startled by the sound of a distant, undistinguishable, articulable words. I trembled. Was it a hallucination, I thought? But no! On listening more attentively, I could plainly hear a murmur of voices, but I was too weak to make out what was said, but that was someone was speaking, I was certain. I feared for a moment that I might be the sound of my own words brought back by an echo. Perhaps I might unconsciously have cried out. I closed my lips tightly and again applied my ear to the wall. Yes, voicesly, undoubtedly. I dragged myself to some distance along the wall, and then heard the sounds more distinctly. Could I catch an indistinct murmur of distorted and unmeaning words? They sounded as if someone was humming them in a low voice. Once or twice, I caught the word "forlord" repeated with the accent of sorrow. What did it mean? Who was speaking? Clearly either my uncle or Hans, but if I could hear them, surely they might hear me. "Here!" I cried with all my strength. "Here!" I listened and watched with the darkness of it for an answer. A cry, a sigh, not a sound. A crowd of ideas ran through my brain. I fancied my enfeebled voice could not reach my companions. "For it is certainly they," I said. "What other mortals would there be here, 90 miles underground?" I listened again. In trying backward and forward along the wall, I found a point where the voices appeared to attain their maximum of sound. The word "forlorad" reached my ear again, and the thunderous sound which had first arrested my attention. "No!" I exclaimed. "It is not through this rocks that I hear the voices. The wall is of granite, and the loudest sound would not penetrate it. The sound comes by the gallery itself. There must be a very peculiar acoustic effect." I listened once more. Yes, this time I heard my own name distinctly echoed through the gloom. It was my uncle who uttered it. He was doubtless taking to the guide. The word "forlorad" was a Danish word. And then I understood it all. To make them hear me, all I had to do was to speak with my mouth close to the wall, which served to conduct my voice, as the wire conducts the electric fluid. I had but no time to lose. If my companions happened to change their position, even by a few paces, the acoustic phenomenon would have been destroyed. I went close to the wall, and I said slowly and distinctly, "Uncle Lindenbrock!" I awaited with a painful anxiety. Sound did not travel quickly here. The density of the atmosphere increases its intensity, but not its velocity. A few seconds, which seemed ages, passed, and I at last heard these words. "Axel! Axel! Is that you?" "Yes, yes," I answered. "My child, where are you?" "Lost in the most intense darkness." "Where is our lamp?" "Out." "And the brook?" "Disappeared." "Axel, my poor lad, take courage." "Wait a little. I am exhausted. I have not the strength to answer, but talk to me." "Have courage," said my uncle. "Don't try to speak. Just listen to me. We searched up and down the gallery looking for you. We failed to find you. And I wept for you, my child. Then we came down again, firing as we came, always supposing you still on the channel of the Hansbach. Now that our voices meet, it is purely by a purely acoustic phenomenon. We cannot touch hands, but do not despair, Axel. To hear one another is something. During this time I had been thinking. A ray of hope, slight inweed, raised my spirits. First of all, it was necessary to know one thing. I put my lips to the wall and I said, "Uncle?" "My child," he replied after the lapse of several seconds. "You must first attain the distance separates us." "That is easy." "You have your chronometer?" "Yes." "Well, take it. Call my name, and note the exact moment. I will repeat it the instant you hear it, and you will note again the precise moment. Yes, and half the interval between the question and the answer will be the same time required for my voice to reach you." "Just so, Uncle." "Are you ready?" "Yes." "Well, listen now. I am going to call out your name." I put my ear to the wall, and as soon as I heard the word Axel reached me, I instantly answered Axel, and then waited. 40 seconds, said my uncle. Therefore the sound took 20 seconds to ascend. Now, at the rate of 1,020 feet per second, that makes 20,400 feet, nearly 4 miles. Nearly 4 miles, I murmured. Well, that is a practical distance, Axel. But must I go up or down? down. For this reason, we have come upon a vast hollow space, into which several galleries open. The one you have got into must lead here, for I feel certain that all these earth fractures radiate from the immense cavern in which we stand. Rouse yourself and go on. Walk, crawl, slide down steep inclines if necessary, and you will find our strong arms waiting to support you at the end. Forward, my child, forward! These words filled me with new life. Goodbye, uncle, I cried. I go. When I leave this spot, we can speak to each other no more. So adieu. Till we meet again, Axel. I heard nothing more. This singular colloquy, uttered in the bowels of the earth, exchanged at a distance of nearly 4 miles, ended up with the words of hope. I thanked God for having me led through the labyrinth of distance to the only point at which the voices of my companions could reach me. This astonishing acoustic effect was easily accounted for by the physical laws alone. It was produced by a form of the gallery and conducting over the power of the rock. There was many incidents of impracticable sounds being conveyed to a distance. I have experienced the phenomenon in myself more than once, among others in the gallery of St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and notably those curious caves in Sicily, and the labyrinths near Syracuse, of which the most wonderful is Dionysius' ear. These recollections occur to me, and it seemed obvious that, as my uncle's voice reached me, there could be no solid barrier between us. If I traveled the road by which the sound came, I need not despair for a reach unless my strength failed me. I rose, I dragged myself rather than walked. The slope was very great, and I let myself slide. After a little, the rapidity of my descent was alarmingly increased, and threatened to turn into a falling motion. I had no strength to stop myself. Suddenly, my feet lost their hold. I felt myself rolling, and now and then striking the rough projections of what seemed to be a well, a sort of vertical gallery. My head struck a sharp point of rock. I had lost consciousness. Chapter 29. When I came to myself, I was in semi-darkness, laying on thick rugs. My uncle was watching me, hoping for a sign of light in my face. At my first sigh, he took my hand. When I opened my eyes, he uttered a tearful cry. "He lives! He lives!" "Yes," I answered with a feeble effort. "My child," said my uncle, pressing me to his heart, "thank heaven you are saved." I was deeply touched by the tone in which these words were spoken, and more deeply still by the attentions which accompanied them. But it required such dangers to excite the professor to such demonstrations. Then Hans arrived. He saw my hand in that of my uncle. I may say, at least his eyes expressed the great satisfaction. "God dog," said he. "Good day, Hans," I whispered. "Good day. And now, uncle, tell me where we are." "Tomorrow, Axel, tomorrow. Today you are too weak. I have bound up your head with bandages, which must not be disturbed. Therefore, try to sleep now, and tomorrow you shall hear all I have to tell." "Well," I said, "at least tell me what day is it?" 11 o'clock in the evening. Today is Sunday, August 9th, and I will answer no more questions until the 10th of this month. I was really weak, really very weak, and my eyes closed involuntarily, and I was want of a night's rest. So I went to sleep with the knowledge that I had been 4 days long in my state of isolation. Next day, when I awoke, I looked around me. My bed, composed of the traveling rugs, was situated in a lovely grotto, adorned with magnificent delicacies, and the ground was covered with a fine sand. Twilight reigned, nor torch nor lamp was lighted, and yet gleams of light seemed to penetrate by a narrow opening in the grotto. I could hear, too, a gentle, undefined murmur, like the moan of the waves breaking on the sands, and now and again the whisper of a breeze. I wondered whether it I was really awake, or if I was dreaming still, or if my brain, injured by my fall, was suggesting imaginary sounds. Still, neither my ears nor my eyes could be so far mistaken. It really is a gleam of daylight, I thought, that peeps in at the crevice of the rock, and I am sure that what I hear is the murmur of the waves. There is the whistling of the wind. Can I be deceived, or are we once more on the surface of the earth? Has my uncle abandoned his expedition, or has he brought it to a satisfactory close? I was asking myself these questions, to which I could find no answer. When my uncle came in, "Good morning, Axel," he said, joyously. "I would wager a good deal that you are better." "Yes, indeed," I said, sitting up under my blankets. "That is right. You sleep quietly. Hans and I sat beside you in turns, and we have seen you get better step by step. In fact, uncle, I feel quite a man again, and you will say so when you see the breakfast I shall make if you give me the chance." "Certainly, my boy, you shall eat. The fever has left you. Hans rubbed your wounds with some Icelandic nostrum, of which he knows the secret, and they have cicatriced with wonderful rapidity. Our hunter is very proud, I can tell you." As he spoke, my uncle prepared some nourishment, which I ate greedily, in spite of his advice, while at the same time I overwhelmed him with questions, which he did his best to answer. I then learned that my providential fall had brought me to the end of the most perpendicular gallery. As I arrived in the midst of the avalanche of stones, the smallest of which would have been sufficient to crush me, it was to be judged that part of the mass had fallen with me. This fearful mode of locomotion had landed me in the arms of my uncle, where I fell bleeding and inanimate. "I truly am astonished," he said, "that you were not killed 1,000 times over. But for God's sake, never let us part again, for the chances are that we shall never meet again." "Let us never part again. Then the voyage was not over?" I opened my eyes with astonishment, which provoked the question, "What ails you, Axel?" "A question that I want to ask. You say I am safe and sound?" "Beyond a doubt. All my limbs are uninjured, certainly." "And my head?" "Which, with the exception of some contusions, your head is safe on your shoulders." "Well, I'm afraid my brain is affected." "Your brain?" "Yes. We are not on the surface of the earth again?" "No, indeed." "Well, then if I am crazy for the light of day, I hear the wind blowing and the sea breaking." "Oh, that is all?" "Well, but explain to me." "I will explain nothing, for it is inexplicable, but you will see for yourself, and you will understand that geological knowledge is far from final." "Let us go on out then," I said, raising suddenly. "No, Axel, the open air might be injurious to you." "The open air?" "Yes, the wind is rather strong, and I forbid you to expose yourself." "But I assure that I am perfectly well." "A little patience, my boy. If you had a relapse, it would be a serious matter for us all, and we cannot afford to lose time, for it may be a long distance across." "Across?" "Yes. Take another day's rest, and we will embark tomorrow." "Embark?" The word made me jump. "What embark? We had a river, a lake, a sea at our disposal. Was there a ship anchored in some subterranean port?" My curiosity was strongly excited. My uncle tried in vain to quiet me, and when he had at length saw that to deny me would do me more harm than to yield, he gave up the point. I dressed quickly, as a precaution, wrapped up more of the rugs round me, and I went out of the grotto. Chapter 30. At first I could discern nothing. My unaccustomed eyes closed against the light. When I was able to open them, I was stunned rather than astonished. "The sea!" I exclaimed. "Yes," said my uncle, "the Sea of Lindenbrock. It pleases me to think that no navigator is likely to contest the honor of having it discovered, or deny my right to call it by my name. A great sheet of water, a commencement of lake or ocean, stretched farther than the eye could reach. The shore, sloping gradually, presented the waves a beach of fine golden sand, strewn with the small shells in which the first created things had lived. The waves broke there with the echoing murmur peculiar to a vast hollow spaces. A light spray was blown by the breeze, which sprinkled a few drops on my face. On this gently shelving shore, about 300 yards from the fringe of foam, curved gradually the last undulations of steep the rocky counterscarp, which rose with a widening sweep and to an immeasurable height. Some of these hands had their edges torn into capes and promontories by the beating of the surf, and rather farther still, the eye could follow their outlines sharply defined on the cloudy background of the horizon. It was a real ocean, with varying contour of terrestrial shores, but lonely and fearful, wild in aspect. I could see to a distance along this sea was owing to a special light which irritated the smallest details. It was not the light of the sun, with its glorious glittering darts, nor the pale, uncertain radiance of the star of night, which is the only cold reflection. No, the illuminating power of this light, its quivering diffusion, its clear, sharp whiteness, the low degree of its temperature, its more than moonlight brightness, all proclaimed its electric origin. It was like the continuous aurora borealis which had filled this cavern, so vast in extent as to contain an ocean. An arc, or sky, suspended over my head, seemed to compose of great clouds, moving bodies of vapor which some day would certainly fall, by condensation, in torrents of rain. I should have yet thought that under such heavy atmospheric pressure, water could not evaporate. And yet, in some physical reason which was acquainted with, large clouds were spread above us. But it was then fine weather. The electric masses produce a wonderful play of light on the very high clouds. Well-defined shadows were thrown on their lower folds, and often between the two disjointed layers of gleam of singular brightness was thrown on us. In short, it was not the sun, for there was no heat. The effect was mournful, mostly melancholy. Instead of a sky bright with stars, I felt that these clouds was the granite vault crushing me with its weight, and this space, immense through it was not large enough for the orbit of the humblest satellite. I was then recalled to the theory of an English captain who likened the earth to a vast hollow sphere, in whose interior air maintained its luminosity by reason of its compression, and that two stars, Pluto and Proserpine, described within its sphere their mysterious orbits. Perhaps he was right after all. We were really imprisoned in a vast hollow, whose breadth we could form no estimate, as the shore widened as far as we could see, nor its length, as the sky was soon stopped by an irregular horizon line. Its height must be 8 or 9 miles. Where this vault means granite buttresses, the eye cannot decide. But a cloud was suspended in the air, whose height must have been at least 2,000 fathoms, a greater height than that is attained by terrestrial vapors, owing, no doubt, the greater density of the air. The word cavern does not convey any impression of this vast space, but the language of human speech is inadequate to picture what may exist in the subterranean abysses. Nor could I conjecture what geological cause could have produced this great excavation. Could the cooling process have induced it? I knew from the narratives of travelers of the existence of celebrated caves, but none had such dimensions of this. The Guacharo cave in Colombia, which von Humboldt visited, was not exactly ascertained to be 2,500 feet deep. It was measured with sufficient precision to warrant the assumption that it was not much beyond that depth. An immense mammoth cave in Kentucky boasts of giant proportions, for its arc is 500 feet above an unfathomable lake, which has been followed for 30 miles without coming to the opposite shore. But what were these compared to the one I was contemplating? With its sky of clouds, its electric irradiation, and its vast ocean. I thought silently over all these wonders, and I had no words to express my sensations. I felt as if I had been transported to a distant planet, Uranus or Saturn, and I was gazing on phenomena of which my earth nature had no cognizance. To express such novel impressions, I wanted new words, and my imagination was unable to supply them. I looked and thought, and I wondered with amazement, not unmixed with fear. The unexpectedness of the spectacle had brought back the hue of health to my face. Astonishment was called to my aid, and cured me by a new system of therapeutics, and in addition, the dense air was a source of invigoration. By furnishing the abundant supply of oxygen to my lungs, it will be uneasy to understand that after 47 days spent in a narrow gallery, there was infinite enjoyment in breathing this moist, salt-laden atmosphere. I had indeed no reason to regret having quitted my dark grotto. My uncle, already accustomed to these wonders, betrayed no surprise. "Are you able to take a little walk?" he asked. "Yes, certainly," I said, "and there should be like nothing better." "Well, take my arm, Axel. Let us follow the bend of the shore." I eagerly consented, and we began to coast along this new sea. On the left, the abrupt rocks, piled one on the other, formed a titanic group of imposing grandeur. Down the sides, poured by countless walls, which flowed away in clear gurgling streams. Light wraiths of vapor curling here and there among the rocks indicated the place of hot springs, and booked down ran down the decivilities with a delicious murmur, and lost themselves in the common basin. Among these rivulets I perceived our faithful traveling companion, the Hansbach, where merged quickly into the sea, as if it had been doing nothing else since the world began. "We shall miss it now," I said with a sigh. "Bah!" said the professor. "What matters now whether we have that or another?" I thought him ungrateful, but that moment my eye was attracted to an unexpected sight. 500 paces off, round a high promontory, rose a lofty forest, thick and close. It consisted of trees of medium height, shaped like parasols. With clear geometrical outlines, the wind did not seem to have clipped their leaves. In the midst of gusts, they remained motionless, like a forest of petrified cedars. I quickened my steps. I could find no name for these singular growths. Did they belong to any of our already known 1,200,000 species, and they to have the special place in the floor of latrine vegetation? No. When we arrived under the shade, my surprise was not greater than my admiration. I found myself gazing on their terrestrial products, cut on a gigantic pattern. My uncle named them instantly. "It is nothing but a forest of mushrooms," he said. He was right. Fancy the development of these cherished plants in the warm, damp atmosphere. I knew that the Lycobrodum giganteum attained, according to the billiard, a circumference of 9 feet, but these were white mushrooms, 30 or 40 feet high, with a head in proportion. They were in millions. The light could not pierce their dense shades, and complete darkness reigned to be beneath these domes, which lay side by side like doomed roofs of an African city. I was but anxious to go on farther. A deathly chill was reflected from these fleshy arches. For half an hour we wandered among the dusky shades. I felt it quite a relief when we regained to the seashore. But the vegetation of this subterranean region did not stop at mushrooms. Farther on rose from other trees with a disclosed foliage. They were easy to recognize. The humble apparatus of the earth, but the gigantic proportions, lycopods, 100 feet high, monster sigularis, tree ferns as tall as northern pines, leopardarnus, and cylindrical forked stems, terminating in long leaves and bristling through the rough hairs. "Astonishing! Magnificent! Splendid!" cried my uncle. "Here is the whole flora of the second approach. The transition approach. The humble plants of our gardens which now grew as trees in early ages of the world. Look, Axel, and admire. No botanist in the world was at such a show." "You are right, uncle. Providence seems to have preserved in this great hothouse of Andalusian plants, which scientific men have so successfully reconstructed. It is, as you express it, Axel, a vast hothouse, but you might with equal justice call it a menagerie." "A menagerie?" "Yes, indeed. Look at the dust beneath our feet, the bones scattered on the ground." "Bones?" I exclaimed. "Bones of the antediluvian animals?" I eagerly examined this primeval dust, formed of an indestructible mineral, phosphate of lime, and had no hesitation in naming these immense bones, which only resembled dried-up tree trunks. "There," I said, "this lower jaw of the mastodon, and here the molars of the dinotherium. There is the femur, which can only have belonged to the megatherium. Yes, truly, it is a menagerie, and for the bones cannot have been brought here by a convulsion of nature. The animals to which they had belonged must have lived on the shores of the subterranean sea, under the shade of the arbors, scent plants. Look, there are even whole skeletons, and yet..." "Yet what?" said my uncle. "I cannot understand the existence of animals in this granite cavern." "Why not?" "Because there was no animal life on earth, except during the secondary period when the sedimentary formation was produced by the alluvial forces and replaced the igneous rocks with primitive epoch." "Well, Axel, there's a very simple answer to your objection, and that is, this is sedimentary formation." "What? At such a depth below the surface of the earth?" "Beyond a doubt, and the fact can be geologically explained. At a certain period, the Earth's crust was elastic, subject to alternate upward and downward movements. By reason of law of attraction, it is probable that depressions were produced, and that portions of sedimentary strata were engulfed and abysses opened suddenly." "That must be so, and if antediluvian animals have lived in these subterranean regions, who can say that some of these monsters are not still wandering in the midst of these gloomy forests, or behind the inaccessible rocks?" At the bare idea, I involuntarily scanned the various points of the horizon, but no living being appeared on the desert shores. I was a little tired. I went and sat down on the point of the promontory at whose feet the waves dashed with a hoarse noise. Thence I could see the whole of the bay formed by a bend in the coast. At the bottom, a little harbor nestled between the pyramidal rocks. Its calm waters were sheltered from the wind. A brig and 2 or 3 schnoors could have been laid at anchor easily. I almost perfected to see some ship come out in full sail and put to sea before the southerly wind. But this illusion was soon dissipated. We were but too surely the only living creatures in this lower world. In a sudden hush of the wind, a stillness more intense than that of the desert fell upon these barren rocks, and hung over the ocean. I tried to see through the distant mist, to pierce the curtain that veiled the mysterious horizon. What questions crowded to my lips? Where did the sea end? Whither did it lead? Should we ever behold another shore? My uncle, at any rate, had no misgiving. As for me, I hoped and feared at the same moment. After an hour passed in gazing in the wondrous panorama, we took the beach road once more to regain the grotto.